Peace, good people. Welcome back to Princess Garden. Shout out to everybody that joined me on the live this morning. If you missed it, don't be mad at me. It was just like a spur of the moment thing. But this is the same bin that I was harvesting on the live. So yeah, you see the bigger pile of castings, and that is just casting. And then the smaller one is basically a pile of worms, although I do still have a little bit of work to do here. And then there were so many baby worms. So as I went through the harvesting process, I picked a lot of those out, and that's what you just saw. So basically what we were talking about is my harvesting process and why I do things the way that I do them, and things like that. So first off, let's just put this out there, quick disclaimer. My little hands are so ashy. Josue was on the live roasting me about how ashy and dry my hands are. I've known him for like the better part of my life, so he's the only person that can roast me. Everybody else, y'all gonna have to let me be great, okay? But next, we talked about why I like to hand harvest my worms or my castings. And the reason behind that is there are tools that you can purchase or even make. Like they have a big machine that you can put the castings through, and it'll separate the worms from the castings. And then there's like screens that you can purchase. But I feel like that process is kind of traumatic to the worms and the microbes, and it can also it can also injure them. So I choose to do it by hand, just because I feel like it's a gentler process for them. Worms are animals, microbes are living things, so I feel like they have an energy about them, and I just want for my worms and my microbes to be given off the best, highest energy, for the best and highest energy for my customer and my clients' gardens. So that is why I choose to hand harvest. I just want to be gentle as I work with these living organisms, because they are technically in captivity and they didn't ask to be here. So I'm going to give them the best life that I can while they are here in Princess Gardens Worm Farm. So that's just my preference. You guys, of course, you can buy screens or the machines to help with the harvesting process. It's quicker. But, I'm going to take the little 2 hours it takes to harvest one bin, and y'all are going to get some exceptional castings and worms. So you guys also will probably notice that there's still unfinished material over in our harvested pile. And basically my thought process or the process for this. So, I start the bin, it goes for 3 months of getting fed and producing the castings, and the worms and microbes eventually eat the brown paper bag and the eggshell that you see here. This is just like the last of what's left. So after that 3-month period, I like to put the bins through what's called a foraging time period, where the worms, the microbes eat up the rest of the organic matter that's left in the bin. And then, of course, the worms eat those microbes and they poop out the rest of what was left. And then from there, what you see here is what's left. And I do the initial harvesting of the worm castings, and then I let this sit for 2 weeks covered so that it stays moist, and then I'll do another harvesting, but I like to leave it like this for 2 weeks just in case there are worms that I forgot. They still have food while they're in there. Any cocoons that might be in here, although I didn't see very many. I saw like hundreds of baby worms though, so that might be why. But it leaves food for the microbes and the worms to munch on while they are, in their little maturing casting process. So something that you should note worm castings are garden ready from the time that the worm poops it out. You don't have to let it sit or do anything like that. What you're looking at is some type of larva. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, so I like to let it set, and then I'll go through and do another harvest and pull out any worms or cocoons or anything that I see. And then I'll take any additional big chunks of organic matter that might be left in there. So, using the machines and the sifters, it makes for like a finer, more pretty worm casting as a final product, but our castings are pretty beautiful if I'm just keeping it real. So, it just depends on what you prefer to use. So another thing that you'll notice there's not really many pests in here. You guys saw the larva, but that's like probably the second or third time that I've ever seen a larva in any of my bins over the entirety of Princess Gardens Worm Farm. So we don't have a lot of pests. We do have a couple bins that have like gnats, but it's not like an overtaking of gnats. It's like 5 gnats in a bin. And then a couple of my bins do have springtails, but as you guys know, I think that springtails are a sign of a really healthy, thriving bin. So when you see springtails, it means that all is well. You just don't want to let them take over, which means you should probably kind of start letting your bin dry out a little bit if you do see like a large population of springtails. All right, so yeah, I just like to take my time, and I'll be feeling like an archaeologist, y'all. Sorry. I get distracted easily, but I just like to take my time and hand harvest. It's fun. I get to see what the worms are living like. So this is just a worm ball, and that's what you get at the end of the harvest. So I put them in a little bin for now, and I weighed them and everything. So I'm gonna push these harvested castings. There are a few little baby worms in here, which I expected, because there was like a lot of them. So I'm just gonna put the rest of these castings into their holding bin until they are ready to get packaged up. So they'll sit in this bin, and like I said, any cocoons that are in there will hatch and still have food to munch on. Any baby worms that are still in here, they'll grow a little bit, and it'll make it easier for me to pick them out before I go to package them. So I'm just gonna scoot that out of the way and get the rest of these castings out of here so that I can get the bins bedding going. One really cool thing about the new studio that we're in is the floor is like heated, so the water that I poured onto the shredded paper bag is warm, so the worms can go into some warm bedding instead of cold hard bedding. So if you ever purchase worms from Princess Gardens, just know they're a little spoiled and they get to live a luxurious life. One thing you'll also notice is I do not clean the bins in between switching out bedding. I think that the castings that you saw in there at the bottom, those hold some beneficial microbes. There were also little worms down in there, so I don't want to wash it and risk putting bacteria and stuff like that in there. Like the water that I put in there is sterilized, and then the casting themselves are sterile, so I don't want to put risk washing everything out, and then that brings in the opportunity for harmful bacteria and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna sprinkle the worms around and kind of break up the little ball that they have put themselves into. That is a sign of stress. But now that they're back in their little home, they should just work their way down into the bedding. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit more castings just because that's going to help to inoculate the bin. And those beneficial microbes are going to go to work on the bedding and the food that I'm going to put in here right away. So yeah, if you guys have any questions about vermicomposting, you need worms to get your bin started, you need worm castings for your garden, hit me up. And until next time, keep it sustainable. Peace.